Mark 4:35-41, and I believe it's found on 8:16 in your Pew Bible if you'd like to look it up. On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. Other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Then the wind ceased and there was a dead calm. He said to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. It's all yours.
One of the reasons I was excited to come here is your commitment to mission, which has been something that has been a big part of my entire ministry, international, local, and for almost 20 years, a center part of our whole church life was an intergenerational mission trip that we would take to western North Carolina, to Smoky Mountains. I always tried to find, if someone was going to, if groups of people were giving up a week of vacation, I said, let's go somewhere beautiful to do work. And so we, over the years, probably did 200 wheelchair ramps, renovated bathrooms, built roofs that were stronger than the trailers that covered them, and frequently a center part of what we did was a habitat project. It was a poor county, one of the poorest counties in North Carolina, but they had a struggling habitat group, and we came alongside. I think we helped build 35 habitat houses over the years. And for many of those years, the expert from Habitat was a person we called Habitat Tom. Tom was kind of this cowboy poet. He was not good with money. He was really bad at being married, but he was a great carpenter. And we put more care into those habitat houses. He was more exacting with those habitat houses than many multi-million-dollar mansions I've seen built. And so we were working on a house that was on top of the hill. And there was something we had to do up at the top of the house, and Tom asked for a volunteer to come up. And I don't mind heights. I mind falling. I don't like falling, but I'm not afraid of heights. So we were up, I can't remember, either on metal ladders or we're on a metal scaffolding, but we're on something metal. And the clouds were really disruptive. It was a very stormy looking clouds. And we're up there and I go, "Tom, it looks like it's going to rain." He goes, "No, it's not going to rain. I've been doing this all summer. I tell you what's going to happen. That storm's going to go down that ridge and it's going to leave us." Less than a minute after he said that, lightning struck a tree less than 100 feet from us. And I can't quite tell you exactly what he said because we're in church, but it was to the essence, we need to get down now. So I like storms from a distance. There's something about the awesome power of storms. Now, I grew up in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, so there's not a lot of vista, right, in the hills. But I spent 3 years in West Texas after seminary. And the great thing about West Texas, it did look like the moon, but other than that, you could see storms coming from 10 miles away. It was something like totally I had never experienced. So it was pretty amazing. But a storm up close is of a different order, right? Last month, I never would imagine I got a call from a friend in Texas asking me in suburban Philadelphia if we were okay from the tornadoes. Because 2 tornadoes struck around my family and myself. So there's a sense where storms can show us amazing things, but they also are remarkably destructive. I think the same is true for the metaphorical storms of life. Those outside forces of which we have no control. All the platitudes, even more than a few, come from the Bible about how suffering and tragedies make us strong. You know, they do have some truth and merit in them, right? The great English poet George Herbert once said, "Storms make the oak grow deeper roots." Unless the storm rips that tree up from the roots, right? Because some storms are just catastrophic. Same thing in our lives, right? The last 18 months, with all the upheavals, divisions, and disruptions, was a constant reminder of all the things that can rock our boats that are out of our control, right? Not unlike one night about 2,000 years ago on the Sea of Galilee. On that day, when the evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in a boat, just as he was. Now, I'm going to do an adult education in a couple weeks. I guess next week, I think I'm scheduled to do that. We'll announce that after fellowship hour. And I'm going to give a little more background on the Gospel of Mark. But I've often heard folks say, if I could only have been present when Jesus was walking the earth. Have you ever heard that? Have you ever thought that? If I could have only been there. Not so much me. I'm glad I'm going to see Jesus at the general resurrection. Because hanging out with Jesus was full of challenges. Actually, it's still full of challenges if you choose to hang out with Jesus. But we're only in chapter 4, and already there are people out to get him. The crowds in Mark's gospel are not positive. The crowds in Mark's gospel are menacing. They're trying to control Jesus. They're trying to force his hand. And even the disciples, who were right beside him, who had given up at least everything temporarily, they put their life on hold, right, and left to follow him. In Mark's gospel, they're either confused or they're wrong most of the time. Not unlike us as well, right? See, Mark's a cautionary tale about the danger of doing Christian activity without being a true lover of God. Jesus' days were exhausting. And to really be about the kingdom of God is exhausting. You all did a great job yesterday. Those of you who were here yesterday and are here this morning, I'm giving you extra credit. So I'm just put a little tag, a little bit. It's going to go in your permanent record. By the way, there never was a permanent record. Propaganda. And there's so much important things to do in the world. Be a church that serves, what a great aspiration. And here it's more than aspiration. It's what it means for your life together, right? But sometimes, in the midst of doing, we can forget the importance of being. Thomas Burton, who I think is one of the most important spiritual writers of the last 150 years, says this: "We are warmed by fire, not by smoke. We are carried over the sea by a ship, not by the wake of the ship. So too, we are what's deep inside of our beings, not what we do, not what we see. The soul that projects itself entirely into activity and seeks itself outside itself is like a madman who sleeps on the sidewalk in front of his house instead of sleeping inside." And a great thunderstorm came. The boat was almost swamped. Now, I've had the privilege to go to Israel many times. I was involved with some different programs about interfaith relations. I was able to study, I got to study in Jerusalem, which was amazing. But I remember the first time I went to the Galilee, and I love the Galilee. You know, the Holy Land can be kind of disappointing, particularly those of us who grew up in Sunday school, and you have all this imagination, and be a little disappointing. Jerusalem was a bit of a letdown for me the first time I saw it. But the Galilee, you can still imagine, right? The Galilee is amazing, that region. But I remember finally getting to the first time I saw the Sea of Galilee. And first of all, sea is pushing it. I mean, where I come from, that's a lake. Maybe a really big pond, but it's not a sea. Now, at the time of Jesus, it was bigger, right? Because there's been a lot of things happen with the Jordan River and things. But still, you can see from one end to the other. And so, and it's so commercial. So they have these boats that are kind of supposed to look like the time of Jesus. And you get on the boat, whatever country you're from, they put up the flag and they're playing the national anthem. So, old Canada is going on beside me while they're doing the Star Spangled Banner. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure about this. But anyway. And I was thinking, and this story came to my mind. I'm looking at this lake, and I'm thinking, I don't know, this whole storm swamping the boat thing. And almost immediately when I said that, the wind swept down. See, the Sea of Galilee is below sea level. And I'm not a big boat guy anyway, okay? And that boat started doing that. And the sun was shining. And I almost breathed, all right, God, all right, you made your point. You can calm it down now, right? So they do get these ferocious storms that just come down like, the Sea of Galilee is like in a bowl. And so this ferocious storm, and remember, part of the crew, they were sailors, right? Or they're fishermen. So they were used to it. This is where they made their living. So whatever it was, whatever kind of storm it was, that they were fearful, says something about that storm, right? And Jesus was exhausted. He was totally exhausted. Have you ever been so literally dead tired? I mean, Jesus gave and gave and gave. So he's sleeping. He's sleeping through the storm. And they're bailing water. And he's so tired that he's half underwater and he's still asleep. And the fishermen are panicking now. Poor Matthew, the tax collector, he's just already done, right? but the fishermen are nervous. And they go and they wake up Jesus and they say to him, "Don't you care that we are dying? Don't you care we're about to perish?" And if we're honest with each other, we've all said some version of that prayer. Where are you? I could really use you showing up now. I really could have used you yesterday, but I really need you now. I remember walking up a flight of stairs to meet a mother whose kids had been murdered. First time I was going to meet her. And I tell you, I was saying a prayer every step, and it's not a prayer I'll ever repeat to any of you. Because it's a lot like a curse, to be honest with you. So we all have those things where the storms come around us. And this is part of the problem of living in the material world, right? And this is something sometimes we haven't totally reconciled with our faith. Because we do live in the realm of gravity. Great philosopher, one of the, I think, most creative thinkers of all time, certainly of the 20th century, Simone Weil, who died at the age of 36, a fascinating person, talked about we live in two realms, and one of those realms is gravity. And causality is causality. The forces of nature, the forces of evil have their way. And God seldom intervenes in that. But there's a deeper truth as well. The truth that grace is also present. There is a realm of gravity, but there's a realm of grace. And Simone Weil said, "Nevertheless, God remains mysteriously present in creation, without any way changing the calamities which weigh upon us. His grace plays upon the laws of gravity like the sun's rays in the clouds." So they wake up Jesus. And it's still, I mean, it's not the Charlton Heston kind of thing, or, it's not what I'm not a big fan of these religious movies. I think Jesus is kind of wiping out his eyes, and, they're thinking they're going to die, and Jesus kind of looks out and just goes, be still, bam. And then he yells at him, which is really bad pastoral care theology, right? We should have got everybody to say, well, how are we doing? How are we feeling? Anybody want to share how that felt? Right, Matthew, stop crying. That's embarrassing, all right? He goes, what's the matter? He goes, oh, you have little faith. Then I think he goes back and lays down and goes back to sleep. And they were scared to death of the storm. But I think they were more terrified of Jesus. So what was their lack of faith? This always bothered me. All right? I mean, I can see like as soon as the storm's over, they're on Indeed, seeing if they can get a new job. This is not working out. Let's see what's available out there. All right, everybody seems to be hiring. I need to get a new job here. This disciple thing is not fun. But what was their lack of faith? It never made sense to me. The problem was having Jesus in the boat is not enough for them. Faith isn't about having a problem solved. Faith is not about calming the storms. Faith did not stop the flood. But the problem was they didn't realize that having Jesus with them was enough. And that's the challenge for you and I as well. I had an ancient spiritual director one time say to me, and these words have always echoed in my ear, what can satisfy a soul if God is not enough? I did a wedding yesterday in New Hope. And this couple has been a wonderful healing relationship. They found each other. They've been together for 8 years, and it took them 7 to figure out how to do the wedding. And there was this all kinds of things that kind of went wrong. The bride was saying, "Is this a sign?" I go, "No, it's just you have lousy vendors. That's what the sign is." But her brother was in a serious car accident yesterday morning on the way to the venue. And they weren't sure how badly he and his partner were hurt. We saw a picture of the car. It's a wonder anybody walked away from it. They were rear-ended on Route 1 by a truck. But they're both going to be okay. But you can imagine, what that was doing. And, one of the things that came to me, and I said this in the service, was that the core of this event is not touched by the trauma and fear and anxiety about what has happened. We can't help but think about it. Your brother's not here. But the core of the love that has brought you to this point is unshakable. And that is the essence of faith. Most of the time, a lot of the prayers are not answered the way we want them to be, right? The disciples had a good day. Jesus calmed the storm. A lot of times, those external storms that affect us, we just have to get through them, right? They don't go away. But the core, if you know that Jesus is in your boat, more importantly, if you're with Jesus while he's in your boat. As Augustine once said, God is always with us. We're not always with God. But in the midst of our life, in the midst of our service, in the midst of all the storms of this life, if we can remember that God is with us and that that is enough, then we can face anything. We're about to celebrate the sacrament. The sacrament is not only a reminder, but it is an opportunity to practice the sufficiency of the grace of God through Christ. You have an opportunity this morning to say yes. As God has said yes to you, you get to say yes back. In a few minutes, we're going to take up an offering of our monies and our treasures before we come to the sacrament. But what if this moment you also offered up all your fears and your anxieties? What if you would be open to come to the table to receive anew the presence and healing of God? What if you brought your hurt, your failures, your guilt, your fatigue? What if you bring that as well and offer that up to Him? What if we all would say, I wish all these storms would go away, but if you are with me, Lord, that is enough. You alone are my refuge and hope. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.